Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Everyday People podcast. And today we're doing an update on our distribution plan, talking specifically about Film Hub and just how it's all going. It's been about a month or so, I think, since we last sort of spoke about it, and we've sort of gone online with a few of the streamers. So, yeah, we thought we would just give you a quick update about how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, I think for it's going is really the update of it. Like we're on Apple TV and Prime in the States right now for TVOD, which is the transactional so people can purchase the film. We're still waiting to see kind of, the likelihood because right now they're still waiting to see if any licenses come back. I think we're still waiting to hear potentially from Stars and movie, not Tubi, before it officially goes on to something like Tubi. So we're waiting for that. And then what we're doing here in Canada. So we didn't include Canada in that because we want to see what potential licenses might be available to us here. So we are out to Crave and we reached out to CBC Film. So standing by to hear back from that. And I guess the plan is if, they both decide to pass, then we would kind of include Canada in Film Hub scope for when it eventually goes on to AVOD with Tubi. We're hoping to have some clarity one way or another sooner rather than later, or at least within the next 3 to 4 weeks, because in the next 3 to 4 weeks is also when nominations come out for the Canadian Screen Awards. And so we think that's, a great, should we be nominated, hopefully we are, then that'll be a great kind of boost and push to kind of announce that with and like make sure that it's somewhat widely available by the time that, either the nominations come out or the awards is happening, where we undoubtedly win, uh, is the idea. And then I think one of the things, oh yeah, so that's kind of where Film Hub is at. I think it's interesting because we still really like the person that we're connected with. I think still super responsive and that kind of stuff, but there are some added elements on the platform that you can see the virtue of, like you could see what, depending on what your budget's worth paying for, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? Which I think like you get more specific kind of updates or things as you go along if you sign up for, I can't remember what there's like a whole
Yeah,
bunch of stuff of like, a dedicated sales agent person versus this, and you
exactly.
just get more insight into the analytics and stuff like that,
Yeah. But
kind
we
of
can run
thing.
through that. So on the plan that we have, there's an update. So it updates every day and sort of says what's happening, like in terms of if there's been a report by one of the streamers you are on, or if there's a new buyer that's downloaded and is reviewing your film. And so you can follow along daily. And then if you were to buy one of those bigger plans, then you would see more detail, like, and you'd be able to go back further. It sort of only lets you do a 24-hour window. So if you chronically check it the way I do, you would stay up to date. But if not, then you need to buy a plan. But you can kind of see who's reported and done what across, their activity, like who they're sending it out to, who's looking at it, and what the performance updates are from the streamers that are already streaming it. So it can be a little, I mean, I like it, but it might be too much information. You might get kind of like a bit connected or a little attached to watching this update go by. Some of the other components that we really like is the insights, or you get to see sort of your pay schedule, like how much money you're making. At this point, it's only reporting on the TVOD. So these are like rentals. So there's not a lot of them, but they obviously generate more money than, when we get to AVOD. Those will be probably more clicks, but you get way less per click kind of thing. It's just a different system of paying out the filmmakers. And yeah, and they all sort of report on a different schedule. So it's not like you can see it daily or sort of understand how many people are actually watching on a daily basis, which I would love if I knew that, because just to do sort of like the reverse engineering of like, what do you think brought them to the movie? Like, what, did they just find it on the streamer, or was there a bit of news that sort of like landed? Did we do some publicity, or were we in a festival? Like it would be great to be able to sort of trace the connections, but it doesn't quite work that way. But yeah, so far so good. It is going to be like a slow and steady race, I think. And it might be like another month, maybe even 2 or 3 before we really get a sense, once we're up on all the platforms and getting results from all of the platforms, what we're really looking at. But yeah.
Yeah, right now on TVOD, I mean, we haven't made much in the grand scheme of things, but it is actually better than I would have thought. Like, I think we're, at roughly like 100 and something dollars, but at the rental prices, and that's after our, I
Mhm.
think like if it's 6.99 and we get, I don't know, $3 of that. Don't quote me on that math, but like we don't get all of that,
12.
obviously. How
Yeah.
much?
I think
What
it's
did you say?
$2.12.
Yeah, so at a sense, considering we're not currently running any ads or like pushing the film out to the US market overwhelmingly so, I mean that's about 60 something people, right, taking a chance either by way of, yeah, either a recommendation, a letterbox thing, or something like that. Definitely interesting and a win in my eyes because without necessarily going hard or putting it on, we don't have enough traction necessarily on socials to say that it's definitely some post or something that's led people to that. So if that means it's, anywhere from 50 to 60 people kind of just independently interested in this kind of movie, willing to spend the 6.99 on it and are attracted enough either by virtue of the trailer or the poster is really promising. I think for the next once, what we are kind of on standby for right now is to see kind of, I mean, we would love a license, yes, but the climate is so interesting. It's really hard to say if we'll be successful in the license route. So whether it's AVOD or not, like, we're good with that either way, though a license means we get a lump sum of money. And so obviously a license would be preferred. But if it is AVOD, then, that's fine too. But we just wanna we're waiting before we know how to supplement it ad wise in terms of what we're pushing and how we're pushing it. Ultimately, a license is great because it puts some money in our pocket and it's at like, the licenses tend to come from the more, have a, it's not even prestigious, but like, from a network or a studio kind of thing that has
Yeah, for sure.
a stronger brand, obviously, that we can run with. But, the AVOD thing remains true, which is like it's peak accessibility, right? It means we no longer are talking to our audience with like a dollar figure in front of their decision to watch the film. So that would
Mhm.
change, doing ads saying like it's free and you can watch it on Tubi right now is very different from, exclusively on Stars or something like that. Like they both have their pros and their cons, and I think we're open to either, but that's what we're assessing. And I think the next wave of ad spend for us, what we're going to be looking for is connecting with someone who like acutely works in ad management and SEO kind of thing, so that as we
Yeah.
spend, as we have, because right now it's us, me, Google, Reddit, Tanya, and AI trying to figure out how best to kind of use Meta's ad manager and TikTok ads and those kinds of things for us to kind of push the project, but at the scale. And we don't mind spending the money, but we just want to make sure we're spending it most efficiently, kind of thing. And after
100%.
doing some spend over the holiday season, it's hard to assess. It's funny. There's a rapper named La Russell who I've mentioned before. And so he does a lot of like,
Mhm.
he's very independent, does thing. And so he was recently talking about just like ad spend, right? And he's like, listen, the first year of your ad spend, it's like the ROI on it is nothing. It is just spending to spend it to get it out there, kind of thing. And if that's the case, then that's totally fine. I mean, I don't think we don't see there's any regrets or see there's any mistake in spending the money that we did over the holiday season to kind of test and pilot some stuff, because that's probably a very true likelihood of it, right? You could spend, I think, anywhere between like, I think maybe you spend about 3 to 4 thousand on different ad spend stuff, specifically not designer or social media strategy, but just on the actual ad spend between the two platforms. And it was really interesting, the impact and impressions, but the volume with which it can expose something to versus how much of that converts is two different things, right? And I think during the
Yeah.
holidays, our goal was conversion into those independent sales on Patreon, less so awareness. And so just talking with someone who has a like real specialty in this area, because that same spend could have completely different value if it's on AVOD and there's no longer, like I said, that dollar figure amount that is in between
Well,
people
totally.
deciding to watch it or signing up for something.
Yeah, and there's like two things. So like the awareness, you're totally right. Like that wasn't our focus when we did this spend over Christmas, but it still functioned as awareness, but you might need two or three hits, right? Where so like you might be people are sort of semi-aware. But then if we do get some nominations or when we do another push, then we sort of like there's an accumulation of awareness and then maybe it
Right.
needs a third push, right? Like it might need 12 months of, it's kind of what we're doing with the podcast too, and like making sure that we're always putting out material. Like you don't know where the sort of tipping point is. Like we could be building, 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 and you don't even see any of it. You don't know what people are, resonating with until there's that magical little tip, right? Like one really
Mm-hmm.
pops or one thing happens, and then it's like, oh, yes, I have sort of vaguely remember hearing about this thing and hearing good things.
Yeah.
And I guess this is the thing that will push me over the edge. So it is like, you do have to keep on it, I think. It's really been interesting to watch Letterbox
Mm-hmm.
and see the reviews in different languages and like, that would I imagine only be coming from what's happening through Film Hub, right? Like being able to
Yeah.
hit platforms and territories that are not necessarily predominantly English, and but also to see like the number for our watched and how many times like the putting us on a like a watch list on Letterbox
Mm.
like that. Those numbers have like really increased. In which case, you have to think of like, well, for every person who's logging into Letterbox, like that could be like 50x, 100x. And like, especially when we get into AVOD, I'm very curious about this because to me, some of the reviews you can see, like, I would say that, well, you might have crapped out halfway through the movie, right? Like, it wasn't for you. But like, I would say the majority of people who are logging in saying, I watched this, and especially if they're leaving a review, I would be surprised if they didn't watch the whole thing or like a majority of the show, right? And that will really matter when it comes to AVOD, like how many minutes people are watching the movie. And so, yeah, like just the indicators look really promising. And I'm just very curious when we finally get the numbers to see whether that actually there is a correlation, like whether or not you can be watching Letterbox and sort of get a good sense of how the movie is doing.
Yeah. So until the next, like, next kind of pillars drop, whatever, we're kind of in an organic boosting kind of thing. I think focusing mostly on the podcast as a way to kind of further talk about the film and like, just kind of continue to put everyday people branding out there, standing by for, yeah, what either comes of the possible streaming licenses or SVOD licenses, or if we're going to AVOD, and that'll be the next big campaign push in tandem with our awards campaign push for the Canadian Screen Awards, because we're going to be nominated, right, guys? Thanks so
Yes.
much. And then, yeah, and then at the same time, we're also doing so, it's a bit of practical, but also continuing to test things, which is the theatrical distribution, primarily in Canada
Uh-huh.
still right now. And that's because in order for a feature to be eligible for Canadian Screen Awards, there are a certain amount of public theatrical, like commercial theater screenings you need to have. Plus, also, we were reached out to by kind of young and up and coming distributor called Snag Distribution that does a lot of Nollywood films and placement and seen great success there, but wants to continue to branch out. So we kind of worked with them, as well as continue our independent theater outreach to kind of knock off the remaining screenings that we had to do out there and also test some stuff. And so it was
Uh-huh.
interesting. We had two theatrical screenings in Whitby. I think combined, one screening was an early morning screening. There's only a couple of people, if anything, but the evening one was about 50% sold out. And what's really interesting about Whitby in particular is that it has a huge Black community, a huge Black community that is very, like, I guess, like, community engaged. And by that I just mean like goes out and does stuff in Whitby, right? It's not just like, it's not people who are like, oh, I'm going to Toronto if they want to see a movie or they're going to go out for something to eat. Whitby itself has a really kind of like Hamilton, I think, is a city that's like this too, which is like people who are in Hamilton, you can get to the city, but they can like live, they go to the movies, their leisure and recreation they put into Hamilton primarily, kind of thing. And then maybe if it's a
Yeah.
special occasion, you go to the city. And the response was really warm from that community too. And, in the lead up to this, I think one of the things we've learned with working with a smaller distributor as well, and we wanted to team up with them because I think one of the pros is, they're a lot more flexible and not interested in doing things the same old way that some other distributors might, when they have like, brick and mortar spaces and a slew of employees that need salaries, kind of thing. But on the other side, that also means we're both fumbling forward as we figure out what the right way is to promote and to engage that audience. audience, because it is a bit of a like, thought exercise. We have an audience that's super engaged and really turns out for a slew of Nollywood films kind of thing that are a bit more broader comedy, a lot more commercial from the continent. And then we have, something like Dinner with Friends, which is quite accessible, but smaller, intimate, a bit more interior, and trying to see how can we best pull the people that might be interested from this Nollywood audience to kind of what we're working on, to the kind of film that Dinner with Friends is now. So there wasn't a huge, like, we didn't necessarily do a huge push or marketing campaign for those two screenings, because at the same time, our distributor also had a big Nollywood release kind of thing. And so I think when it comes out to capacity, having those kinds of things with a smaller distributor becomes a tougher thing to juggle than when, you might be with a bigger distributor who can, like, send a person or what have you. I mean, they don't really anyways, but that's
Yeah,
one of the
no,
things that I think we recognize.
100%. And I think it's just, the most important thing is that we're working with people who we're aligned with, right? Like we had a
Yeah.
very similar outlook about the state of things, but also what we wanted to do, like what we were willing to do and like willing to work towards. And yeah, I mean, I think the screening was a success for sure for the first one out of the gate. And it is all learning, right? Like I think what we've learned
Yeah.
for sure is being online and having your film available online is just a different like it doesn't conflict with like doing
Yeah.
theatrical. And so, like, it is just a matter of like, and like, it isn't about opening weekend and all of that stuff. That is just a different system, a different era, different kind of film. And so, as much as we want to put in the effort to doing theatrical events and making the film available theatrically, there will be an audience for that, right? And it's just us learning sort of like what our capacity is and like being strategic. But again, just back, it's just learning and having a partner that wants to also learn too and is after the
Yeah.
same thing. It's really great, right? Like it's a really it feels like that is a something that we'll continue to try.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And it's
really
it's
great so
things
far.
that are just, that might be small but are incredibly useful. Like, initially we weren't sure how much, like, kind of keeping a poster in the landmark theater would actually convert or pull interest or that kind of thing. And especially, from their experience when it comes to certain Nollywood films, right? For them it's all online, online, online is how you reach that audience to come out to the theaters. But the more we were like, being there the day of and kind of seeing, it's like the poster, the nature of the film, the title of it, right? It's not necessarily just for the Black diaspora, and, never how we were positioning it, but it became the poster itself, or just the title, or the way the movie feels from the poster was a lot more eye catching than we would have imagined. And we, like, our distribution partner was noticing like the amount of people kind of stopping to engage, because we had a little like poster board there for people who after the screening wanted to take a picture or something like that. But the amount of people stopping to engage and look at the poster and that kind of thing. And it was like, one of the learnings that he had was maybe it would be worth it, right? To kind of just leave the, like, do another run, but get one of those, I don't even know what you call them, but like poster windows kind of thing in the theater with our poster in it, because that might be effective in
Yeah.
getting people kind of curious and whatever about the film. So
I mean, I
yeah.
feel like that's totally true, right? And like we have posters and like I mean, when I go to the theater, when I'm leaving, especially at the VIP, they have, a row of coming soon windows.
Hmm.
And I'm always looking like, well, what's next? Like you're right there. What else are you gonna look at? And it's just like, oh, you make note of something that catches your eye, just like you said. I think that's one of the great things that the film has going for it, and the posters are a representation of that, is the movie is exactly what it claims to be, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're interested in a movie that is called Dinner with Friends, and that's what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. It's, I think it's a great tool for us to use for sure.
Yeah. So the next kind of, I think, as so we talked about where we're at with streaming, and then for theatrical, I think what, now that we've kind of knocked these off, I think what we want to zero in on are like sincerely eventized screenings, right? That might not necessarily happen in a traditional theater, but can be a ticketed event that where, we can have host event. For example, we're looking at Mother's Day weekend as a next, ideal target weekend, and getting ahead of something like Mother's Day and even Thanksgiving from now, working to find brand partners
Yeah.
and things like that that do certain events. You know, perfect example is we had just Jans from Dinner with Strangers was our moderator for our Q&As after when we were at the review. And so that's a person who is kind of known in a hosting capacity and hosting space, right? Who will likely who has a particular kind of audience that intersects with ours, right? And so kind of working with someone like her, for example, and reaching out to her and saying like, what can a Mother's Day kind of event look like? And working with people in like spaces that we can kind of collaborate with to put on an event that has some value. One of the other people that we're reaching out to is like, you know, a Pilates and wellness studio called The Village, right? And they already have community movie nights kind of thing. So working with them to either program the film, you know, for a certain screen thing, or look at what like a kind of collaborated events that is focused on kind of wellness and some of the other themes of the film that come up for the different characters that align with something like you know, a wellness and Pilates studio and the kind of clientele that they have. Yeah, I think as far as theatrical goes, until we know more, you know, otherwise, I think we're really zeroing in on how we can really nail a fully eventized kind of screening that has an independent ticket price. And then, you know, eventually also looking at what theatrical could look like for one offs in the States, but want to kind of assess what the AVOD or licensing experience looks like for America first before we kind of head down that path. And yeah, that's where we're at with
Yeah.
Distro. This true. Right.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's been a real encouraging start, right? It is a lot of work, I will say that. It's a shit ton of fucking work.
Yeah.
But, like in the almost 4 months now, like if you think of the review as sort of like the kickoff to it,
Mhm.
we've done a lot and it's been pretty positive, right? Like we've
Yeah.
learned a lot. We've done a lot of varying things, like not just the same thing. Yeah, and it hasn't all just been us, which I think is, like, also been great is, you and I do a ton of work, Jaleesa helps a lot,
Yeah.
but we've reached out, but people have reached out back, right, to us, right?
Yeah.
So, we're making cold calls, but other people are cold calling us, and we're actually, like, responding and taking up
Yeah.
those opportunities.
And
It's
I
not
think
like
at
it's
least like
void.
once a week, every other week, like, or ever so often, just for you to be like, I don't think anybody is listening to this shit, and I really do not think anyone is gonna watch this fucking movie on this thing. And then you get a comment or an email or something where they're like, "Oh, I've been following along. This is great. I'm trying to download this. Can I thing?" Or I just saw this where, and it's like, I mean, yeah, it seems like not like I think the thing about social media is true, right? When it's not thousands of people and you don't have a following of
Yeah.
this, right? It can feel, but like, yeah, I mean, it's been just one singular person ever so often that's been putting the gas in the tank where like quite genuinely, sometimes I record even if I didn't want to record it, or you're like, well, Gavin's listening, so I gotta like, you know what I mean? Or someone else just reached out, responded on our, and because the other thing too is like you don't necessarily, we don't fully know or know 100% what platform serves introducing the ecosystem the best kind of thing. Patreon
Yeah.
natively is one of those kind of like, once you've established or I'm familiar with you somewhere else kind of thing, then I go to your Patreon. So it's not necessarily the place where we expose or share. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, Substack, and LinkedIn, right? And kind of watering each of those seeds on a weekly basis, however we can. So you don't really know. Substack is a place where it doesn't, we haven't gotten much engagement or anything like that. And it's really just like us reposting the thing. But then, you know, we get a comment being like, you know, on our treatments and decks episodes, someone really liked it. Then they ended up subscribing
On Patreon and
to our Patreon and that kind of thing. And so you're just like, I mean, so honestly, that's all I need is just like, okay, there's someone. It's for someone. It's becoming useful. It's this. There's just one more person added to the list, and yeah, that's always encouraging.
that's it, totally. And it's just I think that's a huge part of it is endurance, but also just letting it happen organically and, like, taking the joy in, like, one person contacting you and saying, like, "This is meaningful," or, like, like, when one post gets more likes than it normally gets, right? Or more
Yeah,
views, and it's not going viral by any means, but it's doing better than the last one did, right? Or,
yeah,
like and even down to, like if that is just because of the time of day, like, even if it is not, it's just completely circumstantial, do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
you're
totally.
learning, right? Like, this is part of it of like, oh, so we are learning, like, evening is better than morning for a theatrical, right? Or like posting
Mhm,
early in the
mhm.
day versus later in the day. The first day of pickup is always better if X, Y, and Z. Like, so it's even that is good and like and just being super modest about it. Like we just hit our goal for Patreon, 50
Yes,
subscribers, which I
50
know is such a
subscribers.
small number for people, but like that was our goal, right? We wanted to hit, we kept it like very modest and
Yeah.
we achieved
And
it, right?
ultimately, like, for every person that subscribes, there's still free subscriptions.
Yes.
But even for every person that subscribes, right, it means one more person that we're more directly talking to when we post, right?
Mhm.
Instead of it means now when we post every podcast episode or when we post certain updates via Patreon, it's going out to 50 people's inboxes, right, who are keen to thing. And I think that's the other thing about slow and steady too, is like we really want people that will like want people to subscribe that find the ecosystem useful or whatever. And are will engage, in one way or another with it, kind of thing. Because my Jaleesa's sister was like, "Should I subscribe?" And I was like, "No, we need people who really will, like, you know what I mean? It's like actually
Mhm.
find this useful and give us a feedback or whatever. As much as I would love more numbers, kind of thing, but you want to know that it's yeah,
Yes,
50
that
people
it's
that
real.
are finding some yeah that they're kind of
Yeah.
seeing real value out of it kind of thing. So yes, we're very excited,
Yeah.
very happy. Those are our distro updates. So we got 50 subscribers on our Patreon. Thank you very much to all 50 of you. Much
Yes,
appreciated.
it is. All right. So see you next time, I guess.
Yes, yes.
All right. Bye bye.